What's up, y'all? You know I don't come on this page that often, but this movie in particular has brought me to this page. Um, I definitely want to give my review on the movie. I've watched it uh, twice so far in its entirety once, and then I went back and watched some more of it again just to kind of get a second take on it. It's been controversial. I've seen a lot of debates based off of the information in the movie. It's brought up a lot of controversy. A lot of old wounds have been rehashed from this movie, and I have some good things to say about the movie, and I have some not so good things to say about the movie, and I have some questions in terms of the motives of the movie. What is the motive? Why is this movie being made now? Why now is this movie being brought to Netflix? And what is their interest, or who's giving Netflix this interest to come out with a movie about Malcolm X? Why are they looking to make a profit from this? So there's a couple of things I want to talk about that I found problematic. It seemed to me that the overall goal of this movie was to clear the names of Norman Butler and what's the other guys? There's a guy named Thomas. I think his name was Thomas 15X. He also went by the name of Khalil Islam. And there's another guy who's in the movie as well, who they work to clear his name as well. But the main guy, who the movie ends with them talking about clearing his name, is Norman Butler, Norman 3X Butler. The movie actually ends with the protagonist shaking his hand and promising him that he's going to submit a petition to the New York DA in order to get Butler's name cleared. Let me first say, even when the movie starts, the protagonist of the movie is a guy by the name of Abu Rahman, I believe his name is, and there seems to be a concerted effort to make him the foremost authority on the assassination of Malcolm X. And I don't even know if I necessarily agree with that. There is a guy in the movie named Zach Kondo who has definitely researched the subject for over 10 years, was on the ground, spoke to primary sources, and he wrote a book on it. He's actually in the movie. His name is Professor Zach Kondo, out of Maryland, and I know people that know him. Actually, I've seen him speak before on the subject of Malcolm, and I met him before. And he's a brilliant mind, and I think that his input is probably he's probably the most authentic thing about this movie, besides the other primary sources. But his input from a scholastic standpoint is the most authentic. They have other people in the movie from the Manning Marable Society, and we know that Manning Marable was a part of a project that came out with a book trying to make hellacious claims against Malcolm X. So I have a problem with their involvement from the jump. And I also have a problem with this over-the-top notion of clearing the name of people that the movie goes out of its way to prove that these people weren't involved in the assassination. So I'm going to go back to that. In terms of Norman 3X Butler, he may not have been in the ballroom from his inability to even get in the ballroom because he was known. He was known in the Harlem Mars. So Malcolm's people wouldn't probably have let him in the door, and if they did let him in the door, they wouldn't have let him in the door without a search. However, if you watch the movie, they show you some footage of William X. Bradley, who is the shotgun shooter, the man that fired the shotgun at Malcolm X. They show you footage of William Bradley outside of the Audubon Ballroom, but they don't show you the footage of a man in a salt and pepper tweed outside of the Audubon Ballroom, which is the salt and pepper tweed, and the hat is something that Norman 3X Butler was known to wear. And that footage is available on YouTube. And they really borrowed from the style of a YouTube documentarian named Omar Shabazz. Omar Shabazz was the first person that I've seen on documentary naming William Bradley as the shotgun shooter. And also was the first person showing the footage outside of the ballroom and slowing it down and showing you William Bradley tucking his shotgun and walking off. But Omar Shabazz, in addition to showing you the footage outside of the Audubon Ballroom of William Bradley, he also showed you the footage of Norman 3X Butler being outside the ballroom as well. In addition to the probability and the likelihood that Norman 3X Butler was outside of the ballroom, attempting to basically break up the scuffle and help people that were involved in the assassination escape, him and another one of the alleged assailants was involved in a shooting weeks before, or a week before, where there was a man named Benjamin Brown who had left the Nation of Islam but insisted on keeping Elijah Muhammad's picture in his storefront. And him and another one of the alleged assassins of Malcolm X, who was said not to actually be involved, basically murdered this guy. So if they didn't participate in the assassination of Malcolm X, they were already murdering people in Nation of Islam affairs anyway. So even if they weren't murderers on that particular day, they were already murdering people on behalf of the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad. I don't see how that makes them innocent men. And this documentary goes way out of its way to clear the name of cold-hearted murderers. There's other issues I have with this documentary as well. Norman Butler being one of them. And the way that Abu Rahman goes out of his way, talking about writing the district attorney to clear his name and all of this other crap. And it just makes you wonder, okay, what is the motive of this film? What is the motive here? Is it about truth? Because you certainly didn't give the audience the complete truth on Butler. Didn't bring up the fact that he was involved in a murder weeks prior. Didn't really put a lot of emphasis on his harsh reputation. A reputation that he built. He built that reputation. Other things that were just completely left out of the movie. They didn't talk about Clarence 2X Gill at all, which was one of the assassins that was shot in the stomach by one of Malcolm's followers. A man named Reuben Francis shot him in the stomach. And he was helped to escape. He escaped to Florida with the assistance of New York City Police Department. And his wounds were taken care of. They didn't mention Clarence 2X Gill at all. Clarence 2X Gill was also the bodyguard of Muhammad Ali. And after he did what he did in the Audubon Ballroom, and he was shot in the stomach, he was helped to escape and was taken to Florida on plane. And these are things that you can look up. You can look up Clarence 2X Gill. He was an enforcer under Farrakhan. And when people were attempting to leave the nation in Boston, they were basically beating the hell out of people to keep them in the nation. Because the allegations that Malcolm had alleged against. They're not even allegations at this point. It's a fact that he was sleeping with young girls and he had babies by them. And people were beginning to leave the nation. So what was happening in Boston is that people like Clarence 2X Gill were enforcers. And they were beating the hell out of people to keep them in the nation. And at that time, Minister Louis X, now known as Minister Louis Farrakhan, was the minister up there in Boston. Now they showed Farrakhan's picture, and they showed the article that was written in the Nation of Islam's newspaper with Malcolm's head cut off. But they didn't tell you that Louis X or Louis Farrakhan was the one that was behind that article that was written in the newspaper saying that Malcolm should die. A man like Malcolm is worthy of death. They didn't tell you that he said that. They showed his face at one point, and then later they showed a picture of the article, but they never connected the two at all. And I felt like that was intentionally done, that they intentionally didn't put out that information, that the public should know that he called for this man's death at that time. And he wrote about it in the newspaper, and he showed an image of this man's head cut off in the newspaper. That's what was going on. And that charge was being led by Louis X. Another thing that was not talked about at all, they talked about how all of the killers came from Newark, March number 25. And as I mentioned before, at that time, the minister, Louis X, was the minister in Boston. But even according to his own statements in terms of where he was that day, he was at March number 25 in Newark teaching. What other time was he in Newark at March number 25? He's the minister in Boston. Why was he at March number 25 that day? Nobody ever asked him why he was at March number 25 that day. I've never heard him being at March number 25 before that or since. But these are not questions that was asked. He was one of the main ministers at that time. He was not interviewed for this film. They didn't say that they reached out to him. They really didn't talk about him. But he was Malcolm's protege. He was trained by Malcolm. Stole Malcolm's speaking style almost completely. When you look at him, he's really, in a lot of ways, a Malcolm copycat. Other things that I found problematic about the documentary was during the Muhammad Ali chapter. They played it as if Elijah Muhammad believed in Muhammad Ali. When Elijah Muhammad told Malcolm that if he was going to go to Florida and support Muhammad Ali, he wasn't supporting him on the basis of him supporting him behind the Nation of Islam. He was supporting him on his own merits. And he believed that Ali was a loudmouth that was going to lose. Malcolm is the one that believed in Muhammad Ali. Malcolm is the one that was there that prayed with Muhammad Ali when Muhammad Ali was getting a little shaken up before his fight with Sonny Liston. Malcolm is the one that prayed with him and instilled that confidence in him. Those other Nation of Islam people didn't come on until he became the champion. And Elijah told Malcolm that he didn't think that Ali was going to win. And then you have these people, and I don't even know their names. I believe that these were people, once again, that were a part of the Manning Marable project in the documentary, saying, oh, Malcolm was playing power politics and losing against Elijah Muhammad because he was trying to leverage his relationship with Muhammad Ali. No, Malcolm actually had a friendship with Muhammad Ali. They planned to travel the world together. Muhammad Ali said the biggest mistake that he ever made in his life was abandoning his friendship with Malcolm, turning his back on Malcolm. He said that's the biggest mistake that he ever made in his life. They had a genuine friendship together, where the nation is the one that ran Ali into the ground. They didn't care about his health. None of that. Kept him fighting well beyond his years. The Nation of Islam is the reason why Ali suffered so bad in his last years. Kept him doped up. Kept him fighting when he was hurt. Made him broke. Took all his money. Elijah Muhammad's sons that were managing him completely took advantage of Muhammad Ali. You can argue that they killed Malcolm X with the fast death, but they gave Muhammad Ali the slow death. Slowly killed him and robbed him over the years. Robbed him of his health, robbed him of his wealth. He wasn't a true benefactor of that relationship that he had with the Nation of Islam. He benefited from the relationship that he had with Malcolm X. Malcolm inspired him. Malcolm prayed with him. Malcolm wasn't looking to get his money. They had a genuine friendship. That's why they planned to travel through Africa together. It wasn't a thing where, Ali is just building up the nation and you give him a name. You're not Cassius Clay no more. You're Muhammad Ali. And then we just pimp you out and run your health into the mud. And make you go broke while Elijah Muhammad's sons are counting millions. This is what happened with Muhammad Ali's situation. And they didn't discuss that. And they just made it like, oh, this was power politics. And Malcolm was trying to use Ali. No, Malcolm actually believed in Ali when none of the people from the nation did. And when Elijah Muhammad didn't either. And then Elijah Muhammad, after Ali won, came back and said, oh, I wouldn't allow it. Me and Allah, we said no. But after Ali won. That's not politics. That's Ali being Elijah Muhammad being a crook. Another aspect of this documentary that I was a little disappointed in is it seemed like Lance Shabazz, from the last few episodes of his show when he was on YouTube, it seemed like he was finally starting to tell the truth about Elijah Muhammad. And he was starting to kind of give Malcolm a fair shake. And then he just went completely against that. And that shows you the cult-like nature of the Nation of Islam, which is something else that not the cult nature of the Nation of Islam. It's a cult. Anytime you killing people because they telling the truth or they have different beliefs, that's a cult. And you saw Muhammad Ali's ex-wife in the documentary saying, yeah, I would have died for Elijah. And Lance Shabazz, who knows the truth about Elijah, and he knows people in the Nation of Islam very well, and knows more truth about Elijah than probably most of the researchers even have access to. He chose not to stand on that truth, and he chose to paint Malcolm as some kind of arrogant bad guy. Oh, they kept telling Malcolm he was the number 2 man and it got to his head. Documentary video on the film itself shows that Malcolm was saying, hey, I'm not the number 2 man. I wish y'all stopped saying that. Elijah Muhammad is the guy, blah, 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 blah. Malcolm was playing it humble. And Lance Shabazz looked like for a while on his YouTube page that he was about to start telling the truth about Elijah Muhammad and everything that was going on. But I guess somewhere along the line, he's fell back from that. He fell back from that completely. And that's disappointing because it seemed like the brother was making some steps towards the truth. I will say some good things about the documentary, because I don't want to just be completely negative about it. even though I felt like I'm questioning the motives of the documentary, why Farrakhan's name wasn't in it. And before I say any good things, let me get into the motives just a little, what I feel like the motives could be just a little bit more, and then I'll say the one or two good things I have to say. Prior to this documentary coming out, and this is why timing is important in terms of why is this documentary coming out now? Prior to this documentary coming out, the Nation of Islam has been on a "We Didn't Kill Malcolm" campaign. Heavy. Go look at Wesley Muhammad's page. They used to call a brother True Islam. Wesley Muhammad been on a "We Didn't Kill Malcolm" campaign. Brother named Nuri Muhammad been on a "We Didn't Kill Malcolm" campaign. Even though at the time they was bragging about it, Farrakhan had speeches basically bragging about it, saying that the men walked in there and they were shooting and that they were brave men. Farrakhan said they were brave men. They were basically bragging about it. If we dealt with Malcolm like you deal with a traitor, what the hell business is it of yours? Direct quote from Farrakhan. But lately, between Nuri Muhammad, Wesley Muhammad, and the Nation of Islam in general, it's been a "We Didn't Kill Malcolm" campaign. Thomas Hare is lying, and basically some spooky CIA people, operatives, were the ones behind Malcolm's death, or blah, blah, blah. But they don't want to take credit for it anymore because it's not popular to take credit for it anymore. But at the time, where it was a thing where you could gain favor with Elijah, everybody wanted to take credit for it. Everybody was bragging on it. Now that Malcolm is even more loved by people than he was then, probably, even though he was loved by the people then, it damn sure ain't no cool thing to be behind that murder. And now they're trying to absolve themselves. And the Nation of Islam has been on the campaign heavy prior to this documentary coming out. And in a sense, you just kind of wonder, what is the motive? You didn't mention Farrakhan's name at all. He was one of the people calling for his death. You interviewed John Ali, but with kid gloves. Didn't really mention how he was stalking Malcolm everywhere, following Malcolm out to LA. Didn't even mention how close he was to Malcolm at one time. That John Ali and Malcolm actually used to live together. John Ali's wife and Malcolm and Betty shared a duplex. In the late 1950s. That wasn't expounded on. How deep the betrayal was in the nation. All of these people that Malcolm was cool with wasn't expounded on. Didn't really talk about Joseph, Yusuf Shah. How basically, not even basically, he admitted to being behind the firebombing of Malcolm's house. And it's known that he was the one that was, he had even tried to get something to wire Malcolm's car up. He became hostile towards Malcolm because Malcolm set him down. Because there was allegations that he was beating his wife. So Malcolm was going to keep him paid pretty much, but out of the eyes of the public until he got himself together, till he stopped beating his wife. He hated Malcolm ever since. How could that be left out of the movie? If the man admitted to being behind the firebombing, why was it left out? The constant calls to Malcolm's house from Nation of Islam people. They were trying to terrorize him. Left out. So it just makes you wonder, what is the motive? And then you conclude the film with you shaking the hand of Norman 3X Butler, who was a known enforcer. He wasn't no innocent man. He was not no innocent man. Like I said, he may or may not have been in the ballroom that day, but there's video of him being outside of the ballroom. And it's a known fact that he was involved in nation business, taking care of folk outside of that. So maybe he just went to jail for the wrong murder, but that don't mean he ain't a murderer. Now, what I will say is, for people that have never learned anything about Malcolm X before, or people who haven't looked into the assassination at all, this may be a good starting point. This is definitely not where they should finish, but this may be a good starting point. This may be a good place for them to start researching Malcolm X. And if they're interested in the assassination in particular, then they can start researching more. There's videos of Zach Kondo, who's in this film. Probably, Zach Kondo is probably the best thing about this film. Just being honest. And I would say, from an entertainment standpoint, they did enough to keep the viewer interested. Those are probably the two best things about the film. From an entertainment standpoint, it was not a boring film. And I will say, just on a personal note, it really bothered me seeing Newark put their arms around Al-Mustafa Shabazz like that. Knowing how grimy Newark can be, and everything that can go down in Newark, and everything that has gone down in Newark, I just don't feel like it should be like that. But why is it like that, really? Because he was in bed with politicians. Seems like he knew several politicians. He was in the shotgun killer was in a Cory Booker commercial. Had another elected official that attended his send-off when he died. And these politicians knew about the rumors. Cory Booker tried to pretend like he didn't know. The other lady was a little bit more honest, but these politicians know about the rumors. And they're not rumors, I'm sorry. They know what it was, that he was the shotgun shooter. They know what it was. But that's why Newark looks the way it looks. That's why Newark has the social issues that it have, because they got corrupt politicians running the place. And that's not just a slight against Newark. Same thing is happening in Baltimore, where I'm from. That's why the murder rates and stuff and the crime is sky high. Corrupt politicians at the top, and the crime just trickles down to the bottom. It just trickles down. So that's all I have to say on this for now. I might have more to say at another time about this, as more information comes out and more people continue to talk. But I just felt like a lot of stuff was left out and not covered. You got 6 episodes. You can't say, oh, we can't put all of this into a short film. This wasn't a short film. You got 6 episodes. If this is successful, you need to go back to Netflix, get some more episodes, and talk about the cult that was the Nation of Islam at the time, and how they were beating people up and murdering people so that they could stay within the cult when Malcolm told the truth about what was going on. Talk about how they were selling drugs at the time and Malcolm was busting up their drug rings, and how they got mad at Malcolm about that. Even in Philly, bust up a little drug ring they had going on in Philly. This was the real issue that was going on. And another thing that I'll say before I close out. History, when it's told by people, sometimes gets really funny because they paint the history as if Malcolm X left the nation and then he immediately began to bring up dirt on the nation and dirt on Elijah Muhammad about the children that Elijah Muhammad did actually have by these young secretaries. But that's not exactly what happened. Malcolm left the nation, said that he still felt that Elijah Muhammad's solution was the best solution, and felt like he could help Elijah Muhammad better outside of the nation than he could within the nation because of his conflicts with basically the royal family. But he said the leadership within the Nation of Islam. But he really wasn't referring to Elijah directly. After this is when he started finding out that they went to one of his friends for a silencer to try to kill him. They also tried to have his car firebombed. There was attempts on his life. He hadn't said anything about Elijah yet. Then they tried to take his house. Malcolm worked 20-hour days when he was in the nation. But of course, they just wanted to take his house so that they could shame him. That was the whole motive about it. It wasn't like they needed it. Elijah Muhammad already had private planes. And basically the equivalent to what would be $1 million estates today. And this was in the 60s. People brag about flying in private planes today. Elijah Muhammad was flying private planes in the 60s. That's how much money he was getting. Hand over fist. And who do you think brought all that revenue in? The main person that was attracting people to the Nation of Islam was Malcolm X. Even Farrakhan came to the Nation of Islam because Malcolm X said that when he saw Malcolm, that he saw a man that either was God or had seen God. So there was a lot of stuff that was left out. And I don't think that the viewers really got a sense of how much of a cult the Nation of Islam is and was. And you got to take your hats off to Malcolm for exposing the truth about that. He could have went along with the get along. He could have been a millionaire too. He could have been rolling in the dough like the royal family. He decided to stand for truth. And he died broke because of it. Because he stood on principle. That's something that Elijah Muhammad never did. Something that Farrakhan never did. They got their money and ran off into the sunset. Never stood on principle. Never stood on principle. Not truly. When Malcolm was making things hot for Elijah Muhammad, instead of standing up and being bold, Elijah Muhammad sacrificed Malcolm to get that heat off his back. Malcolm said he never saw a man as scared as Elijah Muhammad was on the day that Kennedy was assassinated. He didn't even speak after that. Elijah Muhammad was scheduled to speak. Canceled his speech after that. There was heat coming down behind Malcolm. There was warnings. Do something about Malcolm X. Do something about Malcolm X. Elijah couldn't take the heat. Got rid of Malcolm. Khalid Muhammad. He was the national spokesperson under Louis Farrakhan. Condemned in Congress. I think he was condemned in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. What did Farrakhan do? He got rid of him. Khalid Muhammad was shot at by Nation of Islam people. I think he actually got shot. Luckily, he survived. These people do not stand on principle. They stand on their wallet. Getting money hand over fist. Teaching a black nationalist philosophy and living a white supremacist lifestyle. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for now. This is my review of the movie. If you watch the movie, let me know what you think in the comment section. I really want to know what y'all thinking, how y'all feeling about this movie. Let me know what y'all think, man. Write me. I want to hear what y'all think. I'm out.